Medical Center. We are very happy to have you all here, and we have you are muted right now, but if you can unmute yourself or chat in the chat, feel free to do so when you have a question. And we would love to see your beautiful faces if you can keep your camera on. But we also understand if you know you are in the situation you are not able to keep the camera on, but we just appreciate that as well. And we would like to, if you would like to receive a completion certificate, please ensure that you put in your name, full name, first name, and last name on there, so that we can make sure we can get your name correct. And if you do want a completion certificate, please do email us and let us know that. Okay, next slide.
That's me. Sorry.
While Tiffany is moving to the next slide, I'd also like to point out that we've been able to have the good fortune to present these because we've been funded by the state of Kansas for their quality service grants, and also by Cigna, who has allowed us to do this collaboration between Integrated Behavioral Technologies and the University of Kansas Medical Center.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Linda, for adding in that additional information. And again, thank you, Hannah, for chatting in the chat to let everyone know. If you can write your name and your organization. Also, let us know what you are hoping to learn or gain from today's participation. That'd be great. I felt like we see some familiar names and coming back. I really feel like through the webinar we have been doing each month, we are forming a really great learning group together. So today we will be, thank you, Linda, for putting that in.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so today, again, we are supported by IBT and also University of Kansas Medical Center. And we will have our presenter, Miss Tiffany Ward here. Linda, do you want to have the honor to introduce Miss Tiffany Ward here?
Yes, absolutely. So we'd like to welcome Tiffany. She's been a part of the KU Med Center team here for 6 years, 7 years? 7 years, and started off working on some projects here, trying to understand problem behavior in children and the utility of teaching their parents how to understand what purpose that problem behavior served for their young children. From there, she went over and helped work on peer networks with older individuals that had autism and developmental disabilities, and worked with the iConnect project through Juniper Gardens Children's Project, and has since come back to KU Med Center as our one of our main clinic providers here, and is getting ready to pursue her BCBA as she comes back over to help with research and professional presentations. So we're excited to have Tiffany presenting to us today. Thank you, Tiffany, for agreeing to present. Do you want to go to the next slide so we can see the topic? So a little bit of our draft agenda. We'll do our introductions. Then Tiffany is going to present until probably 12:45 or 12:50. We hope that we're going to have an interactive chat so that as Tiffany presents information, you can provide information in the chat and we can address it. So it's a little bit more interactive than just listening to Tiffany talk for an hour. Following that, if we have the time, we'll have some group discussion, maybe some follow-up questions, suggestions. Anytime you see this level up symbol on the screen, we want to hear from you. That's not the only time we want to hear from you, but if there's a question that Tiffany presents, type in the chat how you've applied those concepts in the setting that you work or with your children at home. We'd like this to be parent friendly. So anytime you have any questions or whatever, just make sure you put it in the chat. Next slide, Tiffany. All right. The other thing that we want to do before we turn it over, first of all, I want to say to Jonna, it is not just a mom. We are looking, that's exactly what this is supposed to be for. It's called the Parent Cafe. So hopefully you're going to be able to use some of these strategies with your child. That's exactly what this is designed for. And so, which brings us to the assessment. The part of the purpose of our assessment, excuse me, is to improve our training and assure that we're meeting your needs. We want to be able to support our parents, right? We want to be able to support our families. And once again, that's why it's called a Parent Cafe. So hopefully we're going to provide information for you guys, for those of you on this call who are parents, so that you have some strategies to take with you, right? That's the whole purpose. And so make sure that all of you fill out our assessments or our surveys. You'll get an email with a survey link from us at the end of the last session of these. Put information in there, what you would like future topics to be, what you would like to see from us. How do you think we can better be able to give you information and support so that you can have a learning experience from us. Next slide, Tiffany. And so now here's our presenter, Miss Tiffany Ward, and she's going to talk to us about how to teach emotions to young kids for social emotional health. And I'm going to mute myself and you can take it away, Tiffany.
Perfect. So let me preface as well for the just a mom. I'm a mom myself. So I hope to be able to kind of present some of this information in a way that relates to you. And I'm definitely going to give some examples from my own kiddo throughout the presentation as well. So welcome. Today we're going to talk about, as Dr. Linda Heitzman-Powell said, teaching emotions to young children for social emotional health. Our agenda today, we're going to discuss 3 main points. Our first one is, why is it important for children to identify their emotions? How to help your child identify their emotions, as well as how to help your child cope with their emotions. Why is it important for children to identify their emotions? So school readiness. There is a study that surveyed a group of kindergarten teachers. Of that group, 20% reported that at least half of their class had problems with social skills. Surveys of teachers suggest that there is justifiable cause for concern. For example, one of the recent studies, nationally represented survey of over 3,000 teachers. 30% of those of the kindergarten teachers reported that at least half of the children in their class lacked academic skills, had difficulty following directions, and working as part of a group. And 20% reported that at least half of the class had problems with social skills.
Before you move on, Tiffany, we just got off the phone with talking to some of our special ed directors in the state of Kansas, and they support this 100%. One of the things that they were also saying, which like in general, the impact of COVID has really had I don't want to say disastrous, but has had a negative impact on our kids' social emotional growth, right? And their ability to be able to learn all those skills in the presence of their peers. And so it's really had a negative impact on our kids' ability to be able to develop these skills according to a typical developmental trajectory, right? And so while we know it's important for kids to be able to identify their emotions, it's part of the basic entry into childhood and adulthood is being able to identify their emotions, and that provides the base for people to be able to have meaningful friendships with their peers, right? So
that's a really perfect segue into our next point, is about the school success and what that looks like. And it talks about not only academic success, but it also talks about success with their peers, right? So feeling like they're included and feeling like they're, in this study, they used the word popular and they kind of defined what that meant. So a school success in their early years is another reason why it's important. A series of studies found that children's emotional and social skills are linked to their early academic standing. So for the last several decades of research, it's clear that children's emotional and behavioral adjustment is important for their chances of early school success. Certainly, cognitive maturity plays a central role in children's academic performance. Children who are emotionally well-adjusted have a significantly greater chance of early school success, while children who experience serious emotional difficulty oftentimes face grave risks of early school difficulty. A series of studies has clearly demonstrated that children's emotional and social skills are linked to their early academic standing. For many children, academic achievement in their first few years of schooling appears to be built on a firm foundation of children's emotional and social skills. So think about as early as preschool. Things that are a little bit more successful for preschool and that they focus on those personal growth skills, those social connections. So are they sharing with their peers? Are they empathetic? And they kind of build those connections to their peers as early as preschool or kids stuff, daycare. So those foundations of how do I understand how my friends are feeling helps them gain more friends, and it helps that social network grow with them. So not only do they are they learning emotions on their own, but they're identifying their peers' emotions, which gains to them having a higher and kind of larger group of friends, which then goes with them. And so that can lead to feeling more connected in the school, in the community. So it's got a lot of great positive aspects with that when they're identifying those emotions on their self and others throughout.
I know it's your presentation, but I want to jump in again.
Go for it. You're more than welcome.
The other thing, and this is why, the impact of COVID has been so impactful, is because when we teach kids how to be good friends and we establish those social networks, then when something happens, they have a network to rely on, right? So they may have stubbed their toe on the playground and the teachers are off doing something else. If they have a friend, that friend is there and they can comfort them, right? It's really important to establish that social network for kids and teach them how to identify their emotions so that they can be good friends to others and they can help their friends as well. So
absolutely.
All right, Tiffany.
That's a great example. That's ironically a similar situation happened yesterday. My son came home from school and I could see that he was upset. And we'll talk in the next few slides about some cues and labeling them in the moment. But someone thought that he had cut in line. His little friend said, "No, I was right here. I saw he didn't cut in line." So because he had those social skills to gain those friends, his little buddy stood up for him. And so just like what Linda said, it had someone on his side, that social network for him. It also affects their social relationships with peers, and kind of this concept of social competence that Hubbard et al. Described in their 1994 study. Peer relationships become increasingly important as kiddos get older and play a central role in children's mastery and display of competent functions. This particular study defines social competence as being well liked by peers and being able to influence other peers and direct their activities. So much of a child's play involves recognizing and navigating their play partner's emotions. Are they happy playing this game? Are they having a great time? If they're playing Batman a different way than maybe that kiddo wants, or they break their Hot Wheels, how does that make them feel? And what are ways that they can express that to their friends? Kids that don't have a good social network often end up in our juvenile court system. And it also affects long-term mental health. According to Strategies for Parents, kids who go to jail performed lower academically than their non-criminally active peers. They have a history of poor school attendance and get left back more often. When they're in school, they tend to get in trouble more often and have a higher discipline and suspension rates as a result. This all ties back into that article we discussed previously about academic and their school success. The long-term mental health, there's a higher rate of depression due to lack of connectability with others, difficulty processing their own emotions, and knowing how to successfully cope with those later on in their adult years or even their teen years. Now we're going to move on to how to help your child identify their emotions. So learning to attach words and meaning to emotional cues helps your child to label emotions and express them more clearly. The Anxiety Relief Project refers to the concept of emotion knowledge. As their vocabulary increases, using new words for the different emotions as they're happening leads to a better understanding of their emotions, others' emotions, and how to different settings may also possibly evoke different emotions for others and why.
Tiffany, I think you're going to talk about this in a little bit,
Okay.
but I think it can't be overstated how important it is to help your child identify their emotions, because emotions are inside of them, right? And so they often don't know, like, let's say their stomach is, feeling funny, their tummy's feeling funny, or, they're breathing really fast or something. It's really important for us as the caregivers to look at them and say, you look like you're upset. Are you upset? And they may say, my tummy hurts. And you say, yeah, sometimes when you're upset, your tummy does hurt. That's right. And so it's our ability as a caregiver to navigate that relationship between how they're feeling on the inside and how they can attach that, which would be the emotional cue, and how they can attach a word to that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's important to, in the moment when it's happening, to help them identify and to help them learn those words in the moment so that they can understand that this is how I'm feeling. Oh, they might not have had that word previously, but now you've given them these tools to then the next time it happens, they can use that language and they can express those feelings. Another way that Dr. Linda Heisenpfau just touched on is learning to identify cues that signal how people express different emotions and helps children to understand emotions better. So let's say, for example, we're pointing out that Susie's eyes look like she's been crying and the corner of her mouth are down. That gives us a signal that she's sad. Tying those labels back in that we just talked about, that we had given them the label, now we're giving also the social cues that pair with those. So, okay, I can see that Susie has, her eyes are wet. Her mouth looks like she's down. Maybe her head's down a little bit. She's probably feeling sad. Or Jenny has big open eyes. The corners of her mouth are kind of more pointed up and her head's up and she looks excited or she's happy. Again, giving those cues and pairing them back to the label that we had just previously taught them.
Hey, Tiffany.
Yes.
This is Kari talking from IBT. Sorry. I wanted to wait till you're in a good spot. So I love that you're talking about this because this is something that I oftentimes see with the littles that I run across. across diagnoses. Can you talk a little bit, and maybe you're going to do this after a bit too, but I love giving kids words because so oftentimes it's that they don't have the words yet, but I think sometimes it's important for us big people to think about how we're wording things, because sometimes you'll hear people tell kids like, oh, don't cry. Well, we want to normalize emotion, because emotion is a normal human behavior and a normal human response. It's giving them words of, so if you don't want them to just be sobbing, giving them words like, I feel sad because, or, I feel sad, and giving them the terms to use. Can you talk a little bit about maybe which emotions or how best to start that conversation if they're just starting to really identify an emotion labeling?
Yeah, that's a great segue. That's our next slide. Is kind of, it's like you read this, is talking about those in that moment. So in context labeling of those emotions as they happen. So a little kid stubs their toe. Ironically, Dr. Lynn Heitzen-Powell also mentioned the stubbing the toe. And so here we are. So in that moment, they might be crying, right? They might be holding their foot and giving them, ouch, that hurt. It's okay. And giving those validation statements that it's okay for you to feel sad, or it's okay to be mad. And letting them know that we all feel emotions and they're okay. Here's the emotion you're feeling. Next, we'll talk about coping. And so you're mad, here's what you could do. And kind of identifying those. Same thing if they're working on their homework and that's just really frustrating and they just can't seem to maybe get this math problem. Oh, I can see that your body is kind of tense. You're gripping that pencil really hard and your face looks, your eyebrows are down a little bit. You look really mad. So, and it might be something that you need to talk about earlier on in childhood with those kind of really early formative years, those 2 to 3, where they're really learning that vocabulary and those language and identifying those emotion feelings early on. So that way, when they are in school and they are running into these new situations and new contexts, that they're feeling different emotions, that now they have those languages and they have those labels to be able to effectively use them. Does that touch on it a little bit for you, Kari?
It did. Thank you. That's perfect.
Okay. So ways that you can help your child identify their emotions. So in the moment labeling, what we just talked about. So with that, frustrated with the homework, or they're stubbing a toe, or I had a recent incident where we were at a play date and they had walkie-talkies, and one was blue and one was red. And my kiddo's favorite color, Boston, is blue. His little friend also is blue. And so they got really frustrated. So he kind of like came over to me and was all, man, I want the blue one. I said, it looks like you're frustrated. Sometimes when we play with our friends, they might pick the one that we want to pick. It's okay to be frustrated. Why don't you let him take a turn? And then you could say, why don't we take turns with this? And so that was a very like in the moment, on the fly kind of, I see how you're feeling. I'm going to help you label these cues in your body so that you know, when my body feels this way, this is what that means for me. And modeling and labeling emotions in yourself. Last night, my kiddo was not paying attention to what he was doing and went to hang up his paper on a refrigerator, and my favorite magnet fell and broke. And I got frustrated, and he could see that I was mad because he wasn't paying attention. And so he goes, oh, you look mad. I said, yeah, you weren't paying attention and you broke my favorite magnet. That makes me feel mad. I need a minute, and then I'll help you hang up your homework. And so in that moment, I let him know that it's okay, you know, that I can feel mad too. Mommies feel mad, daddies feel mad, grandma, grandpa, everybody feels mad sometimes, and it's okay.
Can you go back a second, Tiffany?
Yeah.
I just want to jump in here and say monkey see, monkey do.
Mm-hmm.
We are social creatures from birth, and we learn through modeling and imitation for the most part. Now, but it's a little bit different if you have a kiddo with autism, because children with autism often don't pay attention to the cues that their social partner is displaying. And so it takes a little bit more direct instruction for them. Like if Tiffany's son hadn't said, oh, you look mad, what she could have said is, look at my face. Do I look happy? No. What do I look like? Right? So just a little bit of a shift in how to be able to draw your child's attention to those social cues, because it's, you know, it's really important. There's also another saying out there that says, do as I say, not as I do. Well, research has shown us what? That does not work, right? And so you may say, don't hit your brother when you're mad, but if your go-to is, you know, spanking when you're mad at your kids for their behavior, they're going to model that behavior more than they're going to model what you're saying or do what you're saying to them, right? So a critical part of helping your kids identify their emotional state is helping them by modeling that behavior in context. And if they're not paying attention to you, drawing their attention to you to say, look at me. What is my face telling you? What's my body telling you? Right? To help them start to learn how to identify emotions.
Absolutely. That's a really great point. Another thing that I do when I parent, when he's getting to that age where he is a little bit more lippy. And so helping him identify that sometimes his actions then affect others' emotions. And so when he's back talking or he's getting kind of smart mouthed, I often say, look at my face. How do you think what you said makes me feel? And we talk about that. We talk about how our actions can affect other people's emotions by identifying those social cues on my face and having him label those for me and talking about that feeling that I might feel. All right, so emotion identification that we just kind of touched on. So I cannot see my chat because of the way that it's set up, but I would like you to tell me some of the ways that you've helped your kiddos identify their emotions. And if someone could help me read those.
I got you.
Thanks.
Don't be shy to put it in the chat, you guys. Dr. Heitzman Powell said that she helps kids by talking about breathing and their heart rate.
Absolutely. I know my
Sorry.
kiddo,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I know my kiddo for sure. I can tell if he is sitting on the couch and maybe he's getting frustrated or something's going on. If I've got my arm on him, I can feel that heart rate and talking about that. That's a great point.
Kari said, I give them what I visually see, pair it with a likely emotion, and ask if they notice anything internally.
Great. There's those social cues again. Perfect.
Jonna said, it is easy to get them to pay attention when their emotions are regulated. I struggle with getting him to understand or pay attention to me when he is in meltdown mode.
Absolutely. And that is what we're going to touch on next are those coping skills. And when you feel mad or upset, here are some things we can do. And, you know, that repetition is key with kiddos. And so going over those kind of calm down skills will help them, and maybe not tomorrow, maybe not the next day, but it will eventually help them feel and know how to handle that better.
Amy wrote in picture cards, modeling, and talking about how people feel in natural environments by looking at their face and actions.
Absolutely. We're going to discuss coming up to some role playing and some social stories, and having those also be ways that you can help cope with those emotions.
Then we have Kelsey said, I ask them to identify in the moment. When yelling, I ask what they're feeling and try to get them to say angry or frustration or similar by asking questions and then model. I also ask them to identify in others. Wow, look, they seem blank.
That's really great. I really like that you're seeing this kind of negative behavior that we would like to change. So you're giving them that kind of replacement behavior instead, where I don't like this, but I would rather you convey it this way to me instead. So an alternative behavior, but it's still serving that same function of expressing that they're upset, but just in a more socially appropriate manner.
One of the things that I've done is, I was going to put this in the chat, but it's really long, is especially for the kids that I work with that have autism, is it's combined with the internal cues that folks are talking about. But we often label like when your tummy's flip-flopping around, right? And you're feeling a little, people call it anxious, right? But it's really important for us as caregivers to pair that internal state with what's going on in the environment. Because instead of being anxious, maybe they're excited. It's that same internal feeling, but the context gives us a different word to label that. So it's different when I'm feeling anxious because I'm going to the dentist versus I'm excited because we're getting ready to get on a roller coaster ride at the county fair, right? You kind of feel the same way. One's approach, one's avoidant. One we would label as a positive emotion, the other one we would label as a negative emotion. And so I think it's really important too for us as caregivers, when we're helping label these emotions in our kids, that we make sure that we're taking what's going on in the environment into consideration. Yeah, I think books are a great way.
That's a really great point. Actually, Dr. Linda Heitzen-Powell does this in our clinic often. We have a little kiddo that will start to maybe be upset or mad at a situation, or that they didn't get access to a toy. And oh, my tummy hurts, I'm sick. And Dr. Linda Heitzen-Powell often will say, you're crying, you've been screaming, you look mad. Sometimes when you're mad, our tummies hurt. And so she does a really great job of letting him know that this is kind of the contextual clues and situational clues around why maybe your tummy feels this way. And she does a great job tying that back into an emotion, so he understands how he's feeling and how that could maybe make his tummy feel a little off. We ready to move on? Yes, okay. So now we're going to discuss our third and final point of how to help your child cope with their emotions. So we chatted a little bit about these just now, but ways you can help your child identify their emotions. So we're going to specifically talk about role playing and social stories, in the moment discussions, and how to model emotions yourself. So role playing and social stories, reading books together, all great, fantastic ways to address those. So let's say that you have a trip coming up to the dentist. You can talk about things that could potentially make them feel a little scared inside. For example, the sound of the instruments, the bright light that's over their head, while also mentioning the fun parts of visiting as well. So at our dentist, he gets to pick out the toothbrush that he wants, and he also gets a little gold coin and puts it in the machine, and then he gets a toy at the end. So reminding them of the positives and things that are going to make them happy. Reinforcing that it's okay to feel both of those emotions. It's okay to feel scared and happy about going to the dentist. And that if we feel scared while maybe they're cleaning our teeth, here's what we could do. We could raise our hand. We could put a thumbs down to signal that we need a break from having our teeth cleaned, that I'm feeling a little scared or I'm feeling a little nervous. And those are great ways to do that. In our clinic, we role played hair cutting as well. So we identified that the sound of those clippers and the feeling of kind of having their hair cut made them feel scared. And so we practiced that and, let them know, okay, we understand that you feel scared. That's okay to feel that way. Let's practice. And we practiced, they got to cut little pieces of my hair. And then we had some dolls that they could role play on. They got to go into a salon with their parent and practice some of those things too.
Can I jump in a minute, Tiffany?
Yeah.
One of the things, social stories are really good. There's a piece that often gets left out of those social stories. And like Tiffany was just talking about, that's the practice. Mm-hmm. So, just a little bit ago, we were talking about how to identify and emotional regulation in kids. Often little kids, little itty bitties or children with autism have a hard time with like going to birthday parties because they want the present too. And it's especially common in our little itty bitty kids. And so if you have a kiddo that has a hard time when other people get presents, or like Tiffany was talking about, somebody else has, the blue walkie-talkie, one of the things that you can do is, in anticipation of going to somebody's birthday party, practice that, write a little social story, and then practice, saying, oh, it's my turn to open presents, right? So that way it gives them a little bit of practice. It helps them regulate their emotion in the moment. And it also keeps the focus on what it is we want them to do, right? And I think Tiffany's going to talk about this in a minute, maybe. But instead of just focusing on, somebody put it in the chat, instead of just focusing on what we don't want them to do. Right. So I think that's really important.
That's great. That was actually my next example with what we do here with trick-or-treating is oftentimes kiddos want to take the whole hand or they want all of those candies and then they're upset when they can't have them. They're disappointed or they're angry. And so what we do here is we will read a social story about it and then we practice it for several weeks before they even go trick-or-treating. So we set it up in our clinic. We have a little pumpkin bucket and we have little pieces of candy and we practice that. We practice them taking one piece of candy and being okay with then walking away from the candy bucket of all of the big pieces that are still left for someone else. Reading books together. There are some really, really great books out there that talk about emotions and how kiddos, like the main character, goes through the book and handles their emotions. I have some recommendations too. Sometimes I feel like a story cloud, like a storm cloud. That's by Leslie Evans. It covers intense range of emotions that a kiddo can feel. So it goes from all of them, from not just angry, but they're happy too. Today I Feel Silly by Jamie Lee Curtis. That's a pretty popular one. It follows the main character as she learns feelings can change day to day. So sometimes I'm going to be happy and sometimes I'm going to be sad or a little anxious, and those are all okay. Every day and every situation is going to make you feel different things. When Sophie gets angry, she gets really, really angry. This is by Molly Bang. I especially like this one because it also gives coping strategies in the book. If you have an older kiddo, kind of like second, third, fourth grade, Judy Moody books are fantastic too. You get to see her be a little bit ornery And they're great talking points. It doesn't necessarily talk about how she copes with some of the things, but you can talk about how the other characters would feel. How would they feel? How would this make you feel if someone did this to you? They're just great talking prompts to have with your kiddo.
And it promotes literacy.
Double dipping. Yeah. So again, that in the moment labeling their emotions, labeling their emotional cues, that more of that naturalistic kind of teaching. Again, if they're frustrated with their homework, labeling those things that you're seeing. I'm seeing you're gripping the pencil. I'm hearing an ugh when you keep trying, or I'm seeing that you're erasing really hard. It looks like you're frustrated. If you're frustrated on this homework, here's some things you can do. You can take a 5-minute break. You can move to the next problem and come back to this one. Or you could say, Mommy, I'm really frustrated. I need some help. And you can ask me for help and we could do it together. I personally like that one because I think I saw I heard a podcast the other day talking about how when you're an adult and you have been taught as a kid, something's hard, but you did it all by yourself. Look, that was really hard. You did it by yourself. Great job. And we're reinforcing that kind of doing it by themselves and not asking for help piece. So later on in life, when something's kind of hard for them and they're feeling maybe depressed, we've reinforced so much of not asking for help, that if you can catch that early on and you can catch that in those younger formative years of asking for help when they're mad, asking for help when they're frustrated, asking for help when they're sad, then when they're adults, it's second nature to ask for that help. I just thought that was a really cool tie-in.
That is really cool, Tiffany, and it's something that I haven't thought of before because we do typically reinforce independence.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a really good point, that we need to think about under what conditions do we want to reinforce independence, and under what conditions do we want to foster asking for help.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. I like that point.
Thanks.
Welcome.
So cartoons. I know I keep it pretty old school with my kiddo that Saturday mornings we watch Saturday morning cartoons together. And we sit there and we both have our cereal because I'm probably a 5-year-old in reality. And I enjoy my Lucky Charms and cartoons Saturday mornings. And so we sit there and we watch them. And sometimes in the cartoons, just a natural situation comes up where, oh, that looked like that hurt that person's feelings. What would you do in that situation? And it brings up some really awesome conversations that probably wouldn't normally happen if I didn't devote that time to just spending time and watching cartoons and talking about it. So it's a real fun, easy, natural way to discuss those things. There we go. And then likewise, labeling those emotions in yourself. So Dr. Linda Heisman-Powell talked earlier about how kids learn by example. Think of when you see a kiddo outside and they've got their lawnmower bubble machine, they're pushing alongside while mom or dad's mowing the grass. They learn by example. Same thing with emotions. Our kiddos learn their emotions through us, through seeing how we handle our emotions. I know that sometimes I get a little frustrated at home. And so I know I need to watch how I react so that I'm modeling a better example for him, so that when he's upset, he knows this is how I should be acting. These are the things that I can be doing. When I am a very expressive face kind of person. So if I'm sad, you're going to see that I am sad. And he is a very intuitive kiddo. So he asks me, are you feeling sad? And I'll I'll tell them, yeah, I'm feeling sad because of this. I'm going to take some time and just sit in my bed for a minute. And I go remove myself and cry or whatever's going on. But I let, I give and I label some ways that I can handle being sad. Or if I'm frustrated, I've had some projects that I've done for school or for whatnot. And I'm feeling really frustrated by this. I'm going to take a 5-minute break. Let's go play a game. And then I'm going to come back to this because you make me happy. And adding those little things in too are always really nice. So we're going to wrap it up and kind of talk about our key takeaways. So that importance of identifying emotions in early childhood and its effect on their school readiness, their school success, and those emotional relationships with peers that we talked about. So having that peer network and those groups of buddies to kind of do life with and to be on their side or be there when they need some help. Emotional knowledge. It's that beginning stages of empathy. We need to start when they're young. It allows them to, as they get older, be a healthy, involved member of society. It allows them to know how to cope with those skills, how to read others. And like we talked about, it lets them know that it's okay to feel that way and it's okay to ask for help if you need it. And being able to successfully cope with those emotions. So make sure that you're able to hold a job and to interface with people in authority or to face difficult situations. Enables you to be a good social partner in whatever type of relationship that you choose, whether it's a friendship or a dating or a marriage. It lets you, think about a relationship in any situation with another person. You have to be able to read their cues when maybe they're not telling you how they're feeling. And that lets you be an empathetic partner for them.
So what my key takeaway, and I put it in the chat, is it's important to realize when to reinforce independence and when to reinforce. I really like that. But like under the point number 3, one of the other things too is, especially with our little itty bitties and or our kids with disabilities, if they don't have the language or the words to express what's going on with them, especially if they're experiencing mostly negative emotions, what we would call negative emotions, right? Like anger or frustration. What's likely to happen is their friend takes their toy, so they punch their friend. The friend has the blue walkie-talkie, so they take it from them, right? And so the other thing that helping kids recognize their emotions, what they're feeling, how the environment makes us feel certain ways. I don't like the word makes, but contributes to the way we're feeling right now, is that it's okay to be mad, but it's not okay to hit, right? Absolutely. And so by teaching kids more effective ways to cope with or manage, and by providing them with the language that surrounds it, being, Kari, you can talk about this, mindfulness, right? Being present in the moment for those kids when they are experiencing some kind of intense emotion, so that you can teach, so that you can be there for them and say, I understand how you're feeling. Let's try problem solving like this, right? Would you have anything else to add, Kari? I'm going to call on you as a mental health provider in the field. Any other ways to help teach our kids how to successfully cope with some of those really strong emotions they may have?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of literature out there, and when I say literature, I mean actually geared towards children. We spoke on this briefly earlier, but there's a lot of literature out there that ties in really nicely kind of those beginning foundational stages of how to teach emotions, and it goes through a very neutral place of like cartoons or characters versus self. A few things I think of immediately. are coming up with hypotheticals or scenarios of situations that maybe they felt away, because especially those intense emotions are oftentimes very difficult to express and walk through when they're in the moment. So that's number one. So finding books out there is a great tool for some of our younger learners. And then also there are some really good, just thinking of one coping skill, there are some really good adolescent and young children geared muscle relaxation techniques and practices that are very, very playful and fun to do, that you do with them. But rather than teaching them how to relax their quadriceps in their legs, you're teaching them how to tighten their legs to walk through the mud, and then relax their legs so that they can see the difference between being tense and being relaxed. And so that's a really good technique that you can teach to cope with some of the more intense emotions that I have used that I find helpful. I can certainly share with Kayla some of those pieces of information. So if a parent or caregiver would like them, she can easily share with them the list of books that I have found the most useful over the years. Again, very, very kid friendly, very interactive, and not unlike Tiffany's cartoons. It's a great way to then talk about, hey, this elephant felt that way. When have you felt that way? Or tell me about a time when. And so it's a really cool way for them to tie it together and also normalize the feelings in the moment.
Awesome. Thank you, Kari. I put in the chat, like Go Noodle is a really good resource for those types of videos of like relaxing your body from head to toe, but you're like freezing like an ice cube and then you're melting. So it kind of makes it really kid friendly, and those are fun. Also, I wanted to make sure we got to Jonna's question in the chat here. She said, sometimes my son clearly is upset or angry and can express that he is, but when asked why, if I do not know, he tends to say, I don't have a word. How do you try to get that out of them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it kind of goes back to thinking about labeling in all contexts. So not maybe when they're just in that moment, but also when they're feeling happy or sad, and the different situations that kind of go with that. So giving them the language outside of the situation could be a really great way to do that. Asking questions about maybe what happened right before or right after they felt that way. So in ABA and in kind of this autism world, behavior has an antecedent and a consequence. So they feel this way, but what happened right before? So you can see that they're mad or upset, and you could ask, well, what just happened? What were you just doing? And that sometimes can help them kind of jog things for you to kind of pull off of, oh, well, maybe you're feeling mad because, oh, this broke, or so-and-so said this to you, and now you're feeling mad about it. So focusing on that antecedent or what happened right before, or maybe they did something that had a consequence that maybe somebody else didn't like, and that made them feel that way. So looking at all the parameters of the behavior is another great way to address that.
I think in addition to what Tiffany just said, especially for our children that are either language impaired or just forming a language, or for our kiddos with autism in particular that may not have that social communication fully developed yet, is going back to kind of the pictures, the visuals that Tiffany had available, and using them in when you're teaching and working with the kids outside of the event, so that then if you ask why, you can, pull a picture in, like let's say there's a picture of stubbing your toe, or a picture of making a mistake on a paper, or a picture of a kid doing this, or a picture of somebody being really mad, so the emotion pictures as well as some of those common environmental events that you know reliably trigger certain behaviors. So you can use a picture, and you can have maybe a couple of pictures. And I'm going to say specifically for the attendee who has a son with autism, is trying to use some of those pictures, because there's an old saying, you can't reason with a drunk. And the reason is because if you're drunk, you're mentally impaired, right? So you can't reason with that person in the moment. Well, intense emotion has kind of that same impact on our brain, right? So where our cognitive and our executive functioning skills kind of go out the window, and our hindbrain or our primitive brain, or, you know, that old brain kicks in. And so it's not unusual for, in the moment when you're in this intense emotional state, that you have a difficulty retrieving words. And for little itty bitties or kids with autism where they have difficulty with words anyway, it may be beneficial to have a variety of pictures available, so that you can use that to be able to help facilitate their ability to talk about what's going on with them in the moment. So you're welcome. So we're getting, how did I mute myself? We're getting really close to being out of time. I want to take a moment to say, if you're interested in a certificate of attendance,